It's on health and nutrition in dairy cattle, is that right? And he has a very complicated title, Decision Modeling for the Future, Complex Animal Disease Interactions and Computational Optimization on Dairy Farms.
Thanks. First of all, my excuse, I was supposed to be the first one, so where are you just to give a talk? Yeah, thanks for jumping in like that. That's normally not what I do. To give a bit of a background, so I originally come from Belgium. I just moved to the University of Utrecht, and I'm a vet. First of all, just to give you a bit of a background, I think I will need to reload. It's coming there. Yeah, see, because normally there's a picture from when I was young. So I have a background. I come from a dairy farm. So my grandmother was trying to convince me to go into agriculture, but I always had a bit of more of an engineering background. Was incredibly in love with electronics. There it is. So bit by bit, you know. So that's me when I was in the 80s. So I really grew up on that dairy farm. So that caused me to have the passion with animals. But I always was, let's say, techniques. Lego techniques were the thing that I loved extremely a lot. Yeah. First computer at home, I crashed it almost within a year. That kind of things. That's really my passion. So this is my dad somewhere in the bag. But then this one probably. That's the one that really tricked me into doing vet science. I was going to be civil engineer, but my grandma kept on saying, no, become a vet. But the uniqueness, she's dead now, but luckily she did that, because that was probably my power of what I'm doing right now. Because she convinced me, the moment that I was born, to ruin the first PC, but still do VetMed. So, and the thing is that what we saw coming, yeah, is that we will have a need of people that understand both worlds. I'm now invited to a Center of Complex Systems. I must be very humble in saying what level of complexity that I can achieve, but I'll try to give you a bit of a glance of what we're doing. This is how you can describe me right now. I still do this. Yeah? So I still do this because I need to have that practical feeling, biological vision on animals, understanding what's going on. Yeah, I still need to do this. I did a VetMed at the University of Ghent in 2012 already. But I was continuously thinking about statistics, and I found statisticians and mathematicians always very weird people, and now people call me the weird guy within the VetMed often. I did a VetMed degree, I think it's 12 and not 13, but then I decided to do something else. I said, because I was continuously looking at the whole data science world and statistics, which I found so strange, so I said, let's do it. So I enrolled in a Master of Data Science in Ghent. I'm now finishing that one. So you could see me like this, a bit strange, and then eventually I now recently moved to the University of Utrecht to work with one of the people also in the room. So that's a bit of my background. My house clearly illustrates how I am. Every time my wife, I say, somebody asks me to do something, I look for tools and let's say tools and tricks to solve this thing for me. And then suddenly there was this, and this is something that some people will recognize: tools to make things extremely approachable. Yeah, complexity of computers and let's say whole hardware was far away from us, but that comes very close nowadays. Yeah, so you could do strange things at home. So I do that kind of strange things at home. This is an old incubator for embryos from humans and animals. They wanted to get rid of it. I took it to my house. I put an Arduino Mega in it. I have sensors inside of that, CO2, so carbon dioxide is measured. And now I'm breeding my own chicken from Utrecht, but at home. So this is a live dashboard of what the actual temperature is, and I do statistics even to understand when my hatch rates of my chicken go up and down. That's what I love. It's getting very close to what we do. Yeah, we don't need that big bridge and trying to have that network of people. It's getting very approachable. And for the dairy production, it's a bit different. Yeah, I want to give you a bit of an introduction in what kind of situation I work, because we have a very complex let's say, situation in which we work with animals and people questioning them. I can imagine that people in the room, yeah, right now will already question some of the things that I express, but that's also a part of what we do. But to give you an idea, this is where all the hassle started in the early 40s. In the early 40s, somebody put out a figure which was showing people the amount of calories they were taking in from fat, and at that moment that was mainly butter, cheese, yeah, and they were plotting it against the debt per thousands within each country. So that was a graph from 48, yeah, but that one was cause effect, of course, ignored totally, was showing that, for example, Japan was eating almost nothing as it came to dairy products, but then had almost nobody dying from heart disease. As from that moment, dairy was considered as something that might be bad. People, how strange it might sound, but they started doing research thinking that dairy products were bad for humans. Now, the guy himself, before he died, yeah, before he died, he eventually reanalyzed the data set and showed people what he eventually forgot to show. So he had the 6 or 7 points, but he forgot to show these points. He had them available, yeah, he admitted that, and eventually people showed that there are even countries with high intakes which really don't have that high death rate because of heart disease. Okay, it was the 40s, so don't think about computational complexity, it was very basic. But as from that moment, this publication started really to bother us. Because people think that dairy is bad. And I will come back, because I need to explain you what I do from really the source. At a certain moment, what I do vet math. But I have something, yeah, in what I do in my research is linked to who will feed the world. There's an enormous amount of people coming from the developing countries, so somebody will need to feed the world. Yeah? So what I do in vet science is trying to help this kind of things. I will give you some numbers, just so that you can understand why we work with animals and why we try to do things. Yeah? This is the number of milk that's, according to the FAO, right now, yeah, needed to feed humans. If we look at the estimate for within 50 years, yeah, this is the amount of milk, it's double, yeah, we will need to be able to feed the world. If we don't agree by that, then somebody will die of starvation. And it's a very, very powerful thing, but it's also our weakness, that people will consider it as, okay, maybe you should not produce milk with something else. There's a lot of debate going on about that, and we can discuss for ages, yeah? But there is certainly a need for protein coming from dairy products within 2050, 2060 that you want to that we need to, let's say, acknowledge. Although that within, for example, Western Europe, we don't feel that urge. The urge worldwide is there. Yeah. Question, of course, is how are we going to do that? To give you an idea, if we keep on the average milk production per cow in the world right now, yeah, we need about 500 million dairy cows in the world to produce them. But we can do things, because the nice thing is, if we would double the production by then, or we would increase by 1.25% per year, and that's not that big, then we can reach that goal with only about less than half of the animals, which also produce less than half of the carbon dioxide, which produce less manure, which don't need the land, which don't need the protein. Yeah? So this is the difficulty that we have of understanding the global need. Yeah? But of course we have this thing. We're confusing extremely the consumer of dairy products. Yeah? We have something like, for example, organic milk, biomilk. We confuse people by explaining that we are, let's say, producing something which is bad. Normal milk is healthier. Yeah? Biomilk, milk for the Dutch, it's not something bad, the normal milk, but we confuse you a lot. And in that complexity, let's say, I try to work. Reality is very simple. If you look on a global scale, cow milk has a specific calorie, a specific content. Yeah, and then for example, these people, they try to convince people to drink soy milk or almond. By the way, it's not called milk anymore, it's juice. It's water from a plant. It's not milk anymore. There's a European ban now on these products, which is good. So we have the same amount of, let's say, protein and fat and energy in there. But the funny part is that people forget that, for example, if you look at the vitamin content, which is often used as a selling point, milk has it by nature. In all the plant products, they add it, and people think it's healthier for them. This is the most important one. Price per gallon. Milk is extremely cheap to create. it's often cheaper than water. Think about it. Yeah, this is what we're doing, trying to help people, yeah, in the world being fed. But most of all, it's about young people with a passion for farming. Yeah, and I want to give this as a bit of an introduction. Yeah, and you think, wow, complex. What is this? But it's important that you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah, so not that I'm doing something crazy, because I think that animals should not be cared for in such a world. So, some of the trends which are going on. What's the average number of cows in a herd right now? Have an idea? In the world, the average number of animals per herd.
20.
Yeah, people think that those numbers are big. It's only 3. Yeah, because of course it's a very skewed distribution. A lot of farms here with only family farms, 3 or 4 animals. And those are the ones that are dragging, let's say, production down. Those are very inefficient countries because they make use of a lot of, let's say, feed to produce food. We are doing extremely well. The Netherlands is one of the highest ranked countries in the world as it comes to knowledge about dairy cows. Yeah? Don't underestimate that. That's why I'm proud to work in Utrecht as well now. So
what's the number for Holland?
Number for Holland, if you look, for example, the EU is only 12. If you look at Holland, 70, 80, maybe Hans, you know better. I think 70, 80 will be about the average. Yeah, so we're a bit higher. The big countries, for example, are Australia with dens, so they have it in a specific area. New Zealand and these. Yeah, only 150 in the US. People think it's extremely big. Yeah, but it's not. It's just skewed. Yeah. The one that always pops up, there's only 2 farms in Saudi Arabia, and they have about 50,000 animals per farm. They have 2 farms, and Danone is there. Why? Because they can do anything they want. Yeah, as it comes to land use, because they create it from desert, they suddenly create agricultural land, convert it into milk. There's nobody around to complain about the smell. Yeah, and they can have very efficient truck organization and factories and stuff. Yeah, in the Netherlands you have a corporation of trucks running around to get all the milk. It sounds strange, but sometimes these countries do things that you don't.
Who's drinking their milk?
Just they produce it for the local for the locals. Just for local production, so you don't have to ship it. 95% of the milk in the Netherlands is shipped. We're producing for as an exporting country right now. Each of these over there, that's export to the ones who cannot produce. Yeah. Now, efficiency through increasing the output to input ratio. What we're doing is we're increasing the level of milk production. I'm going to show you a movie. If it's loading, don't say it's not loading. Yeah. Very old movie from the 50s, and so you appreciate, very simple, you recognize the color of the animals, which is black and white due to the movie, but also due to the fact that they are black and white. What's the level of milk they produced, you think, in the 50s per head, so per day, on a daily basis? Just to give a bit of a rough idea, what amount of milk does a cow produce per day?
50?
So one of these.
50 liters?
They were producing probably at that time 10, 15 kilograms of milk. 15, yeah, 10 to 15 kilograms of milk. Now, I'm going to show you this woman, this lady, whatever you want to call her. Yeah, this is the world champion right now as an animal. She lives in the States. Where is she at? The movie is not. I had a very nice movie because I wanted to show people that she lives. She's not a robot, and that she's actually also eating grass. That's why I have a movie of her, because I saw her already. What is she producing? Where are we at right now? 95 kilograms per day. So 95 liters next to each other. Yeah. So we have an enormous increase in output. Yeah. So this is a picture of her. She's producing about this amount of kilograms per year. To give you an idea, that's running a marathon twice every day, metabolically.
Is she happy?
Question that people often raise. If I'm honest, I've seen the farmer and his wife. I would live there. The reason why she can do this, is because she's also handled very well. She has an extreme amount of genetic potential, which is combined with the good management and the good, let's say, surroundings, and that's when she's doing well. People often will say, this is animal cruelty. It's not. And there's a lot of debate. But I can assure you, if you manage a Ferrari well, it drives. But of course you don't need to drive a Ferrari if you can't handle the brakes well, and then that's how you should compare.
So she's like a Ferrari.
She's, let's say, she is a Ferrari right now genetically.
Okay.
They are bred quite strongly for one line of, let's say, output, which is milk. And she comes, so the first animals were brought to the US from Holstein, Friesland. She comes with the genes from here, that's the fun part. So she was moved to the US with boats, and then those were, let's say, genetically improved. They were breeding the ones with a lot of milk, and so the output increased. I'm going to give you a bit of a switch towards where I'm going to, because we still didn't talk about complexity. She produces about 1 truck of milk in a year, and I always use this comparison. But she also produces 2 trucks of manure to do that. She drinks about 3 trucks of water to do that. Not only drink, but she also needs it because somebody's cleaning, somebody's having, at Friesland Campina they need to have water to create, let's say, that safe milk. But the nice thing is, she also produces about 4 gigabytes of data to do that. And that's why you see me switching. Yeah, so I have always loved this part. 1 truck of milk is 2 trucks of manure, is 3 trucks of water, is 4 gigabytes of data. Lots of data is coming right now through technology. This is one of my PhD students in Ghent, his picture. Sensor data is coming from this agricultural site, so we learn a lot about her. Why is she doing this? What's her behavior? If she's not feeling well, how is her behavior directed? What can we learn from it? Yeah? So that's what's happening right now. Every time you hear this guy, who knows this guy? He's the European Minister or Commissioner, Phil Hogan from Ireland, for the agricultural business. Every time he talks somewhere, it's about data. The agricultural business needs to do things with data. So that's where we are right now. Reality, I will give you a bit of a feeling of what's happening in reality. This guy likes to farm, but he has this kind of situation where there's a lot of information coming to him and he has no clue. Yeah. He has no clue about how to combine that information. Yeah, decision making is very difficult. There's right now there is scientific reports showing that there's almost nobody focusing on using data efficiently for farmers. Yeah. So the challenge, for example, is that he has this is an animal. Yeah, in a group. She calved last month because she needs to calve when she wants to give milk. Yeah, so she needs to give birth. Then she produces about 35 kilograms of milk, and now she's sick. Now imagine that I need to make a decision. The decision that the farmer needs to make is, should I decide to treat her, for example with antibiotics, because she's sick? But there's somebody who gives me a constraint. Society, people want, for example, maybe that I optimize my usage of antibiotics. They don't want to use, for example, this amount of drugs per animal or per unit of milk or whatever. That's things that the whole industry is concerned about, so there's a constraint on that production in a specific way. This is another animal in the group. She calved 3 months ago. She produces, again, 35 kilograms of milk. Now she's in heat, which means that I could breed her and she could get pregnant, and then there's a new animal coming. Should I decide to breed her, but the government wants me to reduce my phosphate output? Maybe you have heard that everybody's looking at the amount of phosphate people are outputting, and that needs to diminish. Yeah, because we're concerned about the environment. Maybe there will be a constraint on carbon emissions, because everybody wants our cows to not put that much methane out there. Yeah? Should I keep less animals? Or should I keep this animal and cull some of the younger animals? Because she needs to calve. So there's a reproduction cycle. So an animal, she calves, there's a newborn, and after 2 years that newborn enters the herd. So you have an enormous dynamic of animals going in and out of the herd. Another one. Calved 10 months ago, she suddenly produces only 15 kilograms of milk. So she lowers her production suddenly by some reason. Should I decide to replace her with a younger animal? But the bank wants me to keep my most profitable animals, whereas society wants me to focus on sustainability. So society thinks that because we're culling too many animals, we're replacing way too many animals, that we're doing a bad thing, but in fact the bank says, yes, but you need to be profitable. So he continuously struggles with finding what's now good for me, in an enormous complex biological system. So you have to have a way to model flexible constraints. The maximum number of animals, maybe. Maybe somebody needs to focus on the amount of phosphate he uses, or the amount of antibiotics, or maybe hormones we use. Yeah? Combining these constraints, how do you do that efficiently? Maybe there is new emission constraints. You all heard about circulaire landbouw, circular agriculture. How are we going to do that? One of the things that people are thinking about is, for example, we import quite some soy as a source of protein to feed animals. People want us to stop doing that. Yeah? There's a new constraint. Yeah, we need to act. But what will it do with all the dynamics on the farm if we implement those? I'm going to make it a bit more complex. She calved last month and she produces 35 kilograms of milk. But she might get bred, she might get pregnant, she might get sick, might get culled early, she might even die. How do you do this if you also know that we're putting a lot of, let's say, sensors and new analytical methods on her to estimate how she's doing? So you increase enormously the amount of information that you know, which continuously changes your decision. Yeah. If you're working with decision models, you will probably already recognize the term of curse of dimensionality. To give you an idea, if we do modeling, so if we do a probabilistic model for the future, what people, for example, might do is we might say, look, we have a probabilistic model in which we have two levels. She's milking or not, she's pregnant or not, and then you bring in complexity bit by bit. To give you an idea, this complexity is very basic for every farm. But if you look at it from a state space perspective, yeah, and I'm using right now already some terms that some of you maybe don't understand very well, but if you look at this and you want to model the future from cows and then make decisions from it, only on a cow basis, this produces a matrix of transition matrix of 2 by 2. This amount of levels, you go to 16 by 16, 3 million by 3 million. You blow up the state space even in a not so complex way. If we want to then start doing decision modeling for the future, mathematically you get in quite some, this gets quite difficult. Now, let's think about if we want to use disease from one animal, and we say, look, if she's getting sick, yeah, then her herd mates might get sick. Yeah. If we want to, so we want to have animal-to-animal interactions, what you do is, in fact, yeah, you multiplicate your, let's say, transition matrix with the number of animals. And then dairy science and technology right now is creating a lot more spaces, state spaces, so we increase much more the complexity of what we want to do in the future than what we solve right now, let's say, that process of decision modeling. What happens in reality, yeah, this is the truth. There's an interaction between the animal and the farmer. He looks at her, and there's a lot of this going on. So people have tried to use decision modeling for dairy cows. They try to implement it, and in the scientific world it lives. Yeah. So there are people who are doing decision modeling and trying to optimize these decisions. Yeah. But if you look into what's going on in practice, this is what we see. So people will implement a model and the herd constraints are always fixed. So if you would say, look, I now want to have an optimization for the amount of phosphate per animal or the amount of antibiotics or whatever, it's almost not adaptable. Dynamic programming and MCMC models, they avoid animal disease interactions because otherwise the complexity becomes too big. But if you explain farmers, immediately they react, yeah, but that's not the reality. So you need to take into account that complexity, otherwise they really avoid using those. This is my biggest struggle. I've been working with one of the people right now who has done a lot of scientific research in that area, but his models, they live somewhere in a spreadsheet. If you ask him to reproduce it, there's almost no documentation. It's in the head of one guy who has done all of it. If you ask to reproduce it to other scientists or even maybe to the guy who needs to make the decisions on a daily basis, it's almost not possible. If you want to implement it, for example, for the entire industry, it's not possible, it doesn't scale. Yeah? And most of the basic questions take hours to compute, and what happens in the reality is somebody wants to continuously say, I need to do this, then I want to do this, and then can I try to model this? Is this decision better? it doesn't work if you say, I now modeled one decision and it took me half a year. So computationally there's a lot of challenges, and I will show you a bit of what I'm doing right now to try to do that. Some people might recognize some of the things, but can we, and even in the simulation model, make use of what's going on, let's say, in the IT world at the moment? And some people will call it AI, some people, they don't like the term AI. Eventually, what we want to do is we want to make use of what's out there. I have an extreme passion for what's called the Apache Spark. Somebody has heard about Apache Spark? Yeah, it's a technology which is created by especially Facebook, Google and Yahoo, yeah, to be able to analyze, let's say, data, but also combines the architecture of the hardware in the back. I'm quite proud to say that some months ago we published the very first dairy science publication using that framework. Yeah. So we used that framework to model, to predict something in milk for the future. Yeah, it was a machine learning algorithm that we used, and right now we're even looking at some deep learning algorithms analyzing pictures from animals to predict disease. This is one of the things what you can do. For those who want to understand, there are quite some people in Utrecht also using this one right now in their methodology. What Spark efficiently does, so it's about, do you work on an HPC, which has a lot of memory and a lot of CPUs in one building, let's say, or do you think about parallelizing your computation? Yeah. Spark very simply works in a kind of a way where you have one guy orchestrating your workload and then trying to optimize it, yeah, in the back by having different, let's say, nodes within the cluster, doing piece of what you want to do in a pragmatic way. The real mathematical challenge is, in fact, how do you solve the multiplication of a highly sparse and dense multidimensional transition matrix, and then from that work in the decision model. So I'm going to show you a bit of what people have done and then how we are looking at it right now. So people will typically have animals, yeah, and try to model them for 10 years, for example, and then combine those animals within a herd, but they always keep them separate. And what people then typically will do, yeah, is use this representation of the Markov chain probabilistic process, and often people will look for dynamic programming. So dynamic programming, some of you might know it. So they will try to, let's say, split that complex problem into sub-problems, solve it iteratively, and then try to optimize the decision in a specific way. These are some of the publications. For example, they try to estimate what is the value, economic value, when an animal is pregnant, yes or no. Yeah? Or what is the, if I would do my reproduction on the farm like this or like this, what's the difference? But they never touch ground. That's the difficulty. They will never get implemented, so we never get feedback on the fact if we want to use it. So the first thing that we did recently is we tried to extremely use we used this model because I could convince the guy to collaborate and open up his code. So we rewrote his entire spreadsheet models in such a way. His model was running for about hours for one farm of 100 animals. Yeah, we entirely rewrote his dynamic programming model in such a way that it became purely functional. So no states were held in our code. Everything was purely functionally programmed. So when you would execute a model, it would be scaled up towards, for example, 10 nodes if you want that. But the nice part is, you can say, for example, model it, but model it for one animal here, one animal there, the other animal there, and combine your results in much more efficient way and much more quick. Yeah, we have I had a master student working on this, but you need to have master students who are able also, and then maybe PhD students, to combine their biological knowledge, document well how they did it, why they did it. Because if I asked the guy who wrote this, it's a bit slow, yeah, to change something in his model, it's almost impossible because it's so fixed in that spreadsheet and it's dangerous and it's not reproducible. So one of the things that we're trying to do right now. MCMC, another way to model decisions within the dairy sector. Victor Cabrera is one of them who uses it a lot. People from Simhert in Denmark do it a lot. But again, if you ask to increase complexity in the model, of introduce new disease or new constraints, it stops. So what we're doing again, can we optimize MCMC's algorithms so that they run in parallel? Again, I'm very humbled to admit that for me that's quite a big jump. But if I go into or look for people who try to do it, yeah, and very close to the veterinary or dairy science that we do, we often, yeah, we fail to jump to the fact where you really start implementing things and make it practical. Strategy 3, this was introduced by people from Microsoft recently to me, which is quite intriguing. Is there anybody using simulation modeling right now? I guess maybe a lot of you. Eventually what you end up with is you have the biggest complexity why people use MCMC and dynamic program is because we try to solve that matrix multiplication in an efficient way. There's one thing in your computer that can do that very efficiently, which is your GPU. Yeah. So Microsoft came to me and said, why not try to see if we can, instead of trying to solve your problem with that dynamic programming and whatever you want to, why not try if we can get indeed the TensorFlow use the GPU, and maybe you could get much quicker answers, because from a modeling perspective, building that transition matrix is much more easy, document-wise, and then you can increase your state space much more easy, instead of going into that scalable code and trying to optimize that. So I now have somebody in Spain who's helping me out to try to use TensorFlow. TensorFlow is what Google uses to do deep learning on pictures, but that's in fact also using your GPU. So we're trying to see if we can run a part of the transition matrix multiplication within the GPU and then combine the results again for the decision modeling. Why all the effort? And with that I'm going to quit for today. Because gut feeling is good, but the data is better. And within our business, it's very difficult to really touch ground with decision modeling, and because we fail to link those two together in an efficient way, so that the industry sees us also as a powerful something to rely on when the world is changing. Because the world is changing much quicker than how we can answer with data-driven, let's say, data-driven, how to say it, so that we can answer with good answers, scientific-based decision or data-driven answers, instead of that gut feeling that we see often on farms. And the gut feeling also causes distrust with consumers of animal products. So we need to be better, become more efficient. So. And that's a bit of what we're doing right now. We're not, let's say, that advanced or that far yet, but we're making first steps in that whole process. My excuse that it was not, let's say, that detailed maybe as you are expecting, but I wanted to also understand you, because often people think that we do strange things with animals on purpose. No, it's because we want to feed you. You also drink milk, and you also have ice cream and have cheese in the evening, and you like that. And that's a part of the world that we need to accept, that we need, but we need to become better. Yeah.
Thank you. Running a bit over.